this is going to sound stupid, but I was very concerned that our guys would start shooting civilians, not because they're bad, but because it's now nighttime and all of a sudden thousands of people are running at you when all day long, bombs going off and machine guns all day long. And so I called down, I'm like, dude, just prepare yourself. But in about 10 minutes, this is happening to you. But I think they're all civilians. I don't see a threat, but this is happening. I hope that made a difference. I don't know if it made a difference, but we made that radio call. And then it's like, okay, I'm like emergency bingo. Like I'm well below bingo. I'm so then it's like, well, what am I going to do? I got no diverts. The whole country has fallen to the Taliban. I'm well below emergency gas. This plane is crashing in a few minutes and the runway is covered in people. All right, you have the aircraft.
Tower, Deployment is release to you, runway 4 left, wind 040 at 5, clear for takeoff.
Seats high, altimeter 0 eyes, we're clear for takeoff, clear for the airspace. Fire check 2. My burn ramp curve was at 354. So yeah, that's on. Next picture, 16, 15,000, driver on target.
Oh, Sam, thanks for joining me on the podcast. It's we were kicking it off before I hit record. We're going to have to recap some of those awesome stories there, but thanks for joining me. You, I think, are the first U-28 / AFSOC Bubba I've had on the podcast, so welcome.
I'm super happy to be here, and I love what you're doing. I think it's awesome. Inspire the next generation to get after it, you know?
Yeah, well, you definitely got after it. We're going to dig into a lot of your career, but I want to kick it off just starting with like what got you involved in flying and what was your path to get into the Air Force?
Ooh, okay. So I'm not somebody who's super ate up with flying per se. My dad was a Ranger. My brother's a Ranger. My granddad was in Merrill's Marauders, so the precursor to the Rangers. I don't know. I always kind of got it. I feel calm. I like fighting. And so I looked at the world and I said, when I was in high school, college, the only fighting that existed was Operation Northern Watch and Southern Watch. And so I said, if I'm going to get after it, the only chance that I have to do that kind of stuff that my granddad got to do when he was bayoneting Japanese in the jungles of Burma, the only opportunity I've got is to try and fly. So I guess I'll roll the dice and try and fly. And then 9/11 happened. I was in ROTC and, I went to pilot training. I flew C-130s, which I was not personally super happy about, but the truth is I didn't do good enough in pilot training to get anything else. So I was exactly middle of the class. I got C-130s. I was happy to get C-130s because I didn't know anything. It turned out that it was an awesome assignment. I loved it because at that phase in the Iraq War, early in the Iraq War, so this is 04 through like 08, C-130s were doing a lot of cool stuff, and I was fortunate enough to do that. So anyway, long story short, I started not by being interested in flying, but by being interested in fighting. I found a way to get into something where I could get after it, and so that I did. And I ended up with, I think I'm in the upper percentages of combat time. I was very blessed to be able to get after it for a long amount of time. My family's great. My wife supported me. She's wonderful. But yeah, I spent a lot of time deployed and getting after enemies all over the globe.
Well, I was going to say, I was just looking at some of the things you sent over. So air medals, typically single sortie air medals, or what are the accumulation of 20 sorties? I see, is this like your 35th Oak Leaf cluster? 33rd right. Oak Leaf. Yeah. So you're
36 or so. Yeah. Something like that.
Flying a lot of time. When did you transition to the U-28?
2009. So I knew a lot of dudes who went into it when the squadron was initially stood up in late 2005, early 2006. They took some guys from my base. I was a C-130 guy. The guys they took were great people. The whole U-28 mission was really secretive, and you know how it is. I mean, people are naturally attracted to something that's selective and secretive. And so I really wanted to get after it, and I took kind of a circuitous route to get there. But when I got there, I was very happy. And I've flown a bunch of stuff other than the U-28 as well. So primarily ISR with U-28, but I've been instructor evaluator attack aircraft as well. So lots of different aspects of our global war on terror I was able to get after.
Yeah, we do have a lot of talk because Carl Miller, who I had on the podcast, I think you guys were squadron mates in the Cessna 206 AC-206 with the Afghans, right? As well. Did you do that as
Yep. So I flew as a 208 and the
208? Yep, sorry.
AC-208, yeah, which is just that's cool, man. It's just a Cessna that we put rockets on and a designator, and so having some knowledge of how designators work and laser guided rockets work was helpful. Carl's a great officer and a great human being. Probably one of the best officers I've met, period, in my whole career. He's a super professional dude. We're lucky to have him.
Yeah, I agree. And now he owes us $20 for that plug there. But yeah,
very good. Hey up, Carl.
Yeah. All right. So I want to jump back. So I'm thinking when I'm going through pilot training, because I graduated pilot training in 2009, there was the U-28 was starting to pop up on the radar. I think guys and gals were dropping out of pilot training, or like maybe it was just about coming about, because I ended up vaping. So I can't remember there. And then there's also some like weird, I say weird stuff, things that it was, I forget how they actually dropped it, but it was like just a airplane, it's like what happened at drop night, but it was guys going over to AFSOC. Talk to me about like that time frame in AFSOC, how it kind of transitioned, because what I really would like to know is like, as the U-28 came online, the MC-12, while that was ACC, eventually became AFSOC. AFSOC is kind of AFSOC's kind of like a growing beast at this time period, right?
Yes. Well, SOCOM was a growing beast during that time period because, so I'm just going to speculate here, but I think that when the war started, they started, let's just talk about Afghanistan, very special operations heavy. We've all seen the horse soldiers and things of that nature where small teams of special operations folks, along with agency folks, were embedded within the Northern Alliance. And they were able to sort of build momentum using air power, using B-52s and other aircraft that were able to come there and in ground-based laser designators. They were able to do a really amazing thing and just take a stalemate, which was Afghanistan at the time, the Taliban having most of the country with the exception of the Panjshir Valley and, some southern and western tribes, but really the Panjshir Valley. They were able to go in there in a short amount of time just by guts and boldness and bravery, just absolutely, and technology, just absolutely dominate and destroy massive amounts of Taliban. I mean, what they did in the early days is amazing. But then slowly the war transformed into a conventional thing. And that's an interesting discussion because as the techniques and tactics changed, I think our objectives also changed. They went from initially maybe 5-meter objective, and I'm just speculating here, but kind of 5-meter objectives of revenge for 9/11, and it turned into, I don't even know. Do you even know what our objectives were? I mean, create a stable, democratic Afghanistan that's going to be a beacon of hope and change in the middle. I don't even know. I mean, but it turned into something, and as it did, more money, more conventional forces, more of all that stuff went there. So anyway, fast forward to 2009, all of a sudden we're like, dude, this conventional thing is creating a lot of casualties. Turns out it's very easy to be a guerrilla fighter and to bide your time until somebody's walking outside and then to hit them with an IED or a sniper or whatever. It turns out it's very, very hard to be a conventional occupying force. Oh no, what do we do? Well, we start ramping up special operations to try and find unconventional means of getting after our enemies who are not playing by rules that we're used to, but instead hiding amongst the populace. So anyway, what I think it birthed, and again, I'm speculating here, but what I think it birthed is the best way I could summarize our strategy from, call it 09, 10, 11, until really the end of the global war on terror. I think our strategy, best as I can relay it from the trenches, was a two-pronged assault. Number one, let's build up the government institutions of these various countries, whatever they are. Let's build up their military. Let's do advisor stuff. Let's just make them better and more lethal so they can handle it for themselves. And number two, let's do a concerted military effort from us on high-value targets. Let's kill enemy high-value targets, destroy enemy command and control mechanisms, prevent the enemy's ability to gather strength, simultaneous with build organic domestic institutions, those two things together. And again, I'm summarizing what I assume our strategy is. Those two things in parallel, in concert together, will equal a winning approach. Would you agree with my sort of summary of our strategy and the timeline?
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of summarizing it. Because again, we wanted to nation build, for lack of a better phrase, right? Be able to have democratic institutions maintain a stable nation and provide security on their own, right? And then we needed, in order for them to do that, we had to remove the bad guys, or the people that were causing the trouble. How do you fit AFSOC into that picture? I think you're probably the best person to weave this one.
Yeah, that's so great question. How does air power fit into that picture? And here's how I think air power fits into that picture. And AFSOC found a way to be very relevant because they were attached to SOCOM, and SOCOM is, if nothing else, SOCOM is always good at being aggressive and finding a way to be relevant. That's what I'll say for them. No matter what the problem set is, SOCOM, Special Operations Command, will find a way to put some very aggressive, very creative thinkers against a problem to get an outcome. So how does AFSOC fit into that? Well, turns out it's very risky to have forces on the ground. So AFSOC pursued multiple mechanisms of technical means to bring creative solutions to bear. And that wording is vague and easy because, I mean, hey, there's a security, there's a security aspect of this, right?
Yes.
How about this?
That could be the most generic statement ever, but that's so.
Well, that's interesting, Rain, because the most dangerous things are sometimes masked with a very generic statement, right?
Yeah. That's, I mean, there's a big security piece with all this, right? We're trying to navigate that.
Yeah. So precision fires, the ability to find, fix, finish, analyze, exploit, that F3EA loop that, McRaven espoused and some other really noteworthy members of special operations. So finding, like, where in general is your adversary, fixing them, what exactly is their daily habits, where are they vulnerable? Think about yourself. I mean, do you take the same drive to work every day?
I don't anymore.
Okay.
But most people.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Are there 3, maybe 4 different routes that you take? How many number of routes do you take to work?
Right. That's a good point. Yeah. There's not like 2 or 3 options, right? And that's most people.
So if I spend a month watching you, do you think I could fix a pattern of your habit of life?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think I could find you first? Hey, I know you're in the Atlanta area generally. Maybe you've got some things that you do that broadcast your location, some people you love who maybe aren't very disciplined with the way they talk, and find you, and then fix you to say, okay, you know what? He's gone, and I didn't see him for 24 hours. He's gone. I didn't see him for 4 days. I heard he flies maybe commercially right now, and so that makes sense with his habit. But if I keep trying to fix you, if I keep drilling down on that, I bet I can ascertain a pattern in your life. Okay. And once I ascertain a pattern in your life and I have it, then I know that, when you leave your house on Thursday, let's just say, for example, you've got a 40% chance of going to an intersection where for 600 meters, there's no collateral damage. Now I'm going to finish you with precision fires. Okay. Then I'm going to analyze what happened, listen to all the people in your life that we also might know about, chatter about it. And then I'm going to analyze that, and then I'm going to exploit it to find other people like you, who I think are involved in things that I think are bad. And we're just going to continue that cycle until we work through every single target out there. So that's sort of an explanation. And AFSOC found ways to insert themselves through technical means in that process. Is that a fair way that adds some details while keeping it neutered?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Did you see, because you had a little bit of time in the conventional Big Blue, and then most of the time doing AFSOC, when we're talking solving problems in general, everyone tends to gripe Big Blue. It's a lot of bureaucracy. There's a lot of red tape. Were a lot of those hurdles removed for you to, hey, I have a good idea that I think I can solve this problem? Or,
those things still,
those barriers still there that it takes usually moving a mountain to make something happen?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a great question. How about this? You can remove barriers yourself. If you're in a place where there's a need, and there's a culture that's around you that accepts a little bit of flexibility, if you're the kind of person who can just remove barriers, I mean, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, right? If you start with the assumption that, okay, let's just brainstorm this, trust tree, judgment-free zone. Let's just brainstorm this problem set, and let's just say if there were no rules, what would the answer be? Okay, cool. Here's the answer. Oh, well, now there's a constraint. Now there's some rules. We have to obey this. Well, we don't want to do that. Okay, cool. So then you tweak that answer, but eventually you get to a point where if you start with that sort of mechanism of problem solving, you get to a point where you've got options that maybe you wouldn't have thought of if your baseline approach was, what am I allowed to do? Because if your first answer to the question is, how do you solve this tactical problem? How do you become relevant? How do you get in there and mix it up? If your first answer is, well, what am I allowed to do? What does my boss want me to do? Well, then you're always going to be in a self-imposed box, right? If you start with, what's the shortest line between 2 points, and then you start adding on your constraints, I think you might come to a place that is more creative than you would otherwise. And then when you bring those creative solutions to your boss constantly, and you've thought through them, if you've done your homework, you have to figure out a way to staff it. That's just the reality of life. But once you sort of vet it a little bit and you are able to present that in a professional means, people take you seriously. Add that to some combat credibility, having been there and done that a few times, and suddenly you have a seat at the table where serious people are having serious discussions, and you can raise your hand and say, I have an idea that we've been kicking around. It's not fully fleshed out, but here it is. What do you think about doing X? And no matter how outrageous that thing might sound at the beginning, if you come at it from a certain angle and you build a certain amount of credibility, then that thing can get across the finish line. And so, I mean, there are a series of absolutely wild things that AFSOC and U-28s have been able to do in the course of the war by having a culture of approaching problem solving sort of with that methodology, as opposed to approaching it with a very, rule heavy methodology that sort of forces you to say, well, I just assume these constraints are, and so I'm going to get after it. Here's an example, and I don't want to talk about this too much, but I really think that's a great question. Here's an example. I was in Mali in Western Africa. We're supporting the French, and the French are having a really hard time finding the enemy and fixing them and killing them. And we want to support the French so that the French will build some time and space for us to support our own objectives, getting after our own target set. So it's really a lot of political nuance there with we're getting after some shared targets, but some of their sources are our targets and vice versa. It's a really interesting place to navigate. We're told, hey, there's a tick, troops in contact, massive ambush of some forces, and they're in fire now. We want to get after it. Well, if you've looked at a map of Africa, you know that it's absolutely massive. So when you get a report of a tick happening now, this isn't, I'm going to take off from Baghdad and go to Najaf. This is like, I'm going to fly from, Miami to New York City and see if I can, the time here because of the distance is just, it's massive. And so we're like, okay, dude, well, first of all, let's, who do we have to launch immediately? Okay, cool. We're going to launch them. And we're going to get after there. And then while they're flying, we'll start grabbing other details. Okay. And if we can get up there immediately, we'll in the flying time, since we're communicating with a platform, we can transmit them all of the relevant data to actually fix it. So Like, let me just tell you, Rain, take off and fly north. And you're like, what's my MGRS coordinates? I don't have it. Take off and fly north as fast as you can. And in an hour, I'll have both a place for you to land and get some gas, and I'll have probably some coordinates that you might be 80 miles away from. Like, that's how we're living, you know? So anyway, they're flying up there. And a guy comes in who was an experienced dude flying KC-130s, KC-135s. And he's like, oh, you can't send that crew. What? You got to recall them. They flew this morning. And I'm like, I don't care. They're here. They're legal. We sent them. You know, they're doing this. And he's like, well, you can't, because once a crew flies and comes back, that's it. They're done for the day, regardless of the numbers of the crew rest. And I'm like, how about this? How about you show me exactly where that's written in the next 30 minutes, or else they're doing this because we're doing it. Because I don't want to violate something that's written down, right? That's some rules can be bent, others can be broken kind of thing. Anyway, he comes back to me and he says, well, I can't do it. I can't show you. I looked, I can't find anything. But here's what I know. I know that in the tanker, that was our policy. Once you take off and you fly your mission, you come back, like that's it, you're done, you have to reset. And so I didn't think those guys were legal for crew rest. And while he's reporting this to me, those guys are now actively engaged in combat, and I'm working their position to go land and refuel so they can go back to active combat. And it stuck with me. That might not sound like a really deep story, but it stuck with me because here's a dude who was experienced, and one would think that experience is always good, right? Experience always provides you some deep knowledge of how to like do things better. You're experienced. False. His experience informed him that he should start with constraints, what he can't do, as opposed to, you know, some experience out there allows you to say, okay, I know that we did it a certain way before and it worked. So whatever this new problem is, there must be an answer. I'm going to try. So I guess where I'm going with this, and I know this is kind of a long-winded route to answer your question, but it's a really interesting topic, is that there are some people who start with constraints. In the Air Force, for better or for worse, has a culture of starting with constraints. And one thing that I really admire about special operations in general is that philosophically, they don't start with constraints. They start with what they can do. Now, if there are constraints, if there are rules or laws, or, you know, we don't want to kill civilians, or great, work those in, it'll change how we do our problem set. But let's start with being creative. Start with how to be efficient. Start with how to hurt your enemy, and then add in the constraints. And so it was really interesting to see that story sort of play out real time in combat. And we went for it. I'm saying I went for it. I didn't fly that mission. A great captain working for me flew the mission and got after it after he had already flown an earlier mission that morning, and he went to absolute max duty day and slayed the enemy, and good on him. But had we not approached it creatively, we would have been limited in our ability to help. Does that make sense? I don't know. What do you think, dude?
I think that's spot on, because that's what I wanted to go with. So one, to parallel that, you probably have heard that. I think they say about 6 weeks in a squadron, 6 weeks in a new organization. That's about all you're good for. When you show up, that you're going to see how things operate. And then when you see this is maybe not right, or there's a better way of doing it, that you can inject that. After that 6 week point, maybe it's 9 weeks, you are now part of the problem. You're not going to necessarily see it, because that's the way we've always done it. So I think it parallels that tanker guy, right? I mean, coming from his mindset, maybe in the tanker world, like, yeah, if you go fly for 1 hour, just because you land, you don't turn into a pumpkin. You could go fly another sortie if you need to fly another sortie and you're rested, you know, but it parallels that. And I think that's a good way to, because you always hear like the Navy, they start with, you know, if it's not in the book, I can do it, right? And we do the opposite of like, it's not in the book, I can't do it. You know, I have to go apply.
Dude, it's funny. I heard that my whole career, that the Navy lets you do it unless it's expressly prohibited. In the Air Force, you can't do it unless it's expressly prohibited. I'm sorry, unless it's expressly allowed. That's the Air Force way. I flew with the Navy, flew T-44s with the Navy, Didn't find that to be true at all, number one. Number two, turns out I went my whole career in the Air Force just doing things that made sense. And if I could justify it to my boss, if it wasn't expressly prohibited, nobody really said anything to me. It made sense. It's wartime. We did it. So I would say that characterization, which I've heard, is false. And who was it? I think it was Gandhi said, you must become the change you wish to bring into the world, right? So if people don't like the way that they are prohibited from solving the problem, the tactical problems that they have to solve, and they don't like the constraints on them, then I would say challenge those constraints in a professional manner. Challenge your boss to defend the constraints that don't affect the mission. And I think you might be surprised that, most people want to solve the problem, even at higher levels. And it's really easy to throw spears at generals. And, I've done it too, and I will continue to, because a lot of them deserve them. But just try, man. Be the person who tries.
Here's my thought on it. I think maybe AFSOC, never having been in it, you hit on the problem, solving the problem. If there's not a problem, and there's always problems, but it's whatever the common problem is. And, hey, if we're in country X, Y, or Z, and we're going after bad guy X, Y, or Z, that's a unified problem. If you're back stateside, not all the time, right? But I've had some bosses, right? Like their problem, while it should be yours, maybe might not be the most tactically, I guess necessity. It's not the tactics. They're worried about the PowerPoint or whatever it might be. And we can really go down the rabbit hole, right? So I do think you have to have a unified problem set to have that buy-in. My one parallel to this would be demo. Nothing no tactics about demo and doing air shows whatsoever. But I did have some good bosses where we did different things. And it was kind of taking that approach like, hey, while we've never done this before, we can do this, here's the gain, and this is how we mitigate any kind of concerns. And if you have someone who is open and receptive, you usually can sell that. And again, because it didn't create another problem from them or take away from the problems of generating sorties to go down range or what combat air power, you can do it. So I don't know. I wonder what your thoughts are like, because AFSOC, I think, is probably more generally focused or singularly focused on supporting SOCOM and the warfighter. The rest of the big blues sometimes get lost. That's a very general statement, so not completely fair, but unless your unit is going to go down range, you're usually worried about other things. I imagine AFSOC is a little bit more tied into it with GWAT and everything that's been going on in the last 20 years on a daily basis.
Yeah, people used to ask me, because there were a lot of different U-28 squadrons. I've been in a lot of different non-U-28 squadrons and flown a lot of different airplanes. And I'd hear people ask, what's the best squadron? What's the best platform? Where should I go? Blah, blah, blah. And here's sort of my answer is the best squadron is the deployed squadron. Because whatever squadron is downrange facing those real problems with authority to get after it and with a single-minded focus to solve those problems, that's the most exciting place to be. And it's tough. I bet in the fighter world, it's probably really tough to predict how can you be one of those guys. But in different, in AFSOC, you're most likely to be one of those guys eventually / very soon, just because it's very heavily deployed. And I know deployments wear on people, particularly when they're prolonged, which there are prolonged deployments now, and that's tough on the family life. But when there's a war going on and it's been going on for a while, and you're making life and death decisions, and you're there, and your bros aren't coming home, and you're seeing people that you played hockey with, and the hockey, the street hockey thing at Kandahar, and one of them takes a round in the hip, and they're not coming back, and you're in Mazar-i Sharif, and you're eating breakfast with somebody, and you go out and you do a vehicle interdiction with them, and they die. Those kinds of problems become much more personal, and you exploit every single possible avenue to get after them to be the most lethal you can, and there's nothing inhibiting you, and that's the most exciting place to be. So I guess what I'm saying, is that anybody who wants to find a place to be relevant and useful and something that's engaging, something that fills you with a sense that you're invested in a thing that is worth your best effort. That's rare in life. I'm out now. I'm retired now. It's rare in life, like we were talking about earlier. If you have that itch, then join the military, learn to fly, and deploy. You'll scratch it, I promise. And I scratched it quite a bit.
Yeah, looking. I have your 33rd Oak Leaf Cluster Air Medal pulled up here.
Oh yeah.
I want before we jump into I want to get a couple flying stories. This might just lend to it in of itself, but can you give me the career fair, what the U-28 is and does, that type speech, just to paint a picture for those listening who might not be all too familiar with what the U-28.
Okay. Ew. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. We can do the career fair. Like,
well, I actually did a lot of career fields when I was a DO and commander of the ops squadron, one of the ops squadrons, I should say, because I really think it's very valuable to go and to talk to people at UPT and to explain to them what they're getting into if they come this direction, and also to filter out people who maybe aren't a good fit, because we had a lot of people who assumed it was one thing. Obviously, there's a security aspect here. But I would give them secret briefs at UPT. And there were a lot of people who were like, ooh, that's not for me. Perfect. That's a win-win. Find something that is for you. Find the thing, there's many different platforms in the Air Force that have many different functions. Find the function that is best suited to your personality. That's a win for everybody. Don't come here because you want to be a certain thing. Once you know what it is, so because you want to be a certain thing, if it's not a good fit for you personally. For me personally, it was a great fit. But if that's not for you, then go somewhere that is a good fit for you. Like be who you are, follow your heart.
Right. Yeah. Go if you want to go to humanitarian missions.
So how about
this?
So for the U-28 poster, I'll say, if you want to do something that matters for the nation, and works with the best people that we have, going after some of the most intractable problems that we're dealt with, then come to this platform. If you want to fly something that goes really fast, or you want to tell your parents you're doing something and they can, pull up pictures online and look at it and say, wow, this is really cool. If you're inspired by other things, if you want to travel to the most beautiful places in the world, if you want to go to Bali, probably this isn't for you. But if you don't mind sitting someplace in a tent, eating an MRE, doing something that a lot of people are not interested in, talking to your family infrequently, which sucks, but doing it for something maybe at the end that maybe, if the planets align, maybe gets to be really, really impactful. If you're that kind of person, then we got jobs for you. That's sort of how I would phrase it. And there are a lot of things about the U-28 that are not that we could talk about openly, but it's just, there are some things that we can't, and that's just the way it is with a lot of platforms out there, and this is one of them.
Yeah. I did see a brand new one at an air show before they slapped a bunch of stuff in. They brought it in, they stopped it. What was it? I think it did at Shaw. Still had the new leather smell when they picked it up from the factory to go take it to do whatever they were going to put in it. So U-28, if I had a couple $1 million, I would buy a Pilatus. Just saying.
Man, it's a great plane. That and the actually the Caravan. I really like flying the Caravan. You can put it in anywhere. You can land on unimproved surfaces, land on dirt. I mean, I've taken that thing I've landed the PC-12 at over 1,000 different airfields just all across the country. Isn't that crazy?
Wow.
So we can do these, we would do these things called off-station trainers, where we just take a plane for a weekend, and I'd hit up like 40 fields. I mean, private airfields. You're actually north of you, I know you're in Atlanta. There's a place called Heaven's Landing that's really good. It's a private field. Yep. The owner's really cool, really challenging to get into, kind of narrow in a valley. But we would go intentionally looking for the most challenging possible airfields. I mean, FAA hazardous airfields, dirt strips. I went to Hualapai Nation in the Grand Canyon, landing in the Grand Canyon. I mean, think of a challenge, and here's a plane for the weekend, go do it. And if you have that mentality as a squadron, what you'll do is you'll build a squadron of flyers who are excited about finding new ways to challenge themselves, just for the off chance that maybe one day it'll be useful. And you know what? If you do enough weird stuff, it will be. And I've been in situations, as you've seen, that it turns out that it's super helpful to have trained in doing some unconventional things.
Yeah, I was going to save it for a little while longer, but I mean, this might be a perfect segue because you were awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, and just reading through this 15th and 16th of August, we've talked a lot of the C-17 Bubbas, what they were going through on the podcast with regard to what was happening at the airfield. I'd like to talk to you about it and just what was going on then, and then the sortie that you were awarded a DFC for. Can you, I guess let's probably back up to, I don't know, would it be appropriate to back up to pre-planning or what you were doing on the 15th or the 14th of August? Yeah, like what were things? Yeah, what were things looking like?
Oh man, hey, dude, Afghanistan is like a meteor that I'm like this close to, and it's like maybe some time and space I could back up far enough to have like a more cogent opinion. So I'll answer your question. I'll throw some things at you, but I don't know what the right answer was. I am very interested in why we lost the war. I deployed to Afghanistan 10, 11 times, just Afghanistan alone. And I mean, I did everything I could to win, and we didn't. And that was unfortunate.
Do you think we could have won?
What does win mean?
Yeah. I mean, do you think so? Backing up to the beginning of our two pillars, right? Basically establishing establishing a government that would not foster or allow terrorism to grow within inside its borders, as well as remove all the bad people. Do you think if that's a loose definition of winning?
Establishing a government that doesn't foster terrorism within its borders. Is that what you defined it as?
Yeah, well, I think if we jump back to what we were originally, when we opened this podcast up, right? The parallels are like, hey, this is kind of what I think generally are saying is we want a government that's established that we don't have to necessarily support every single day and every single minute. And then we want the bad guys gone, right? I think that's...
Yeah.
If that's what you want to define winning as, bad guys gone and good. Do you think we could have won that?
Yeah, dude. I do not think that we could have established a democratic, fair country that loved America and was willing to cede its territory to be a launching space against Iran in the event that they were to get spicy, and an ability for us to project power throughout that entire region. I do not think we could have made that throughout the territory of Afghanistan as defined by its current borders. But you can shrink that definition of a win to get something. And I do think if we had been smarter and better, brother, I do think that we could have gotten something smart out of that. I think that in 2020, after the Doha Accords were signed, we should have withdrawn. Hindsight's 2020, but I said this at the time as well. Everybody blew me off, but we should have withdrawn the idea of Afghanistan as something defensible. I spent 2020 defending a plethora of FOBs, forward operating bases, staffed entirely by the Afghans, primarily ANISOC, the Afghan commandos, all over the country. We had these tiny little forward operating bases, and I mean thousands of them, dude, indefensible. We had them in the middle of enemy territory in Nimrods, in places that were just so far from the central government, they couldn't get resupply, which I tried to solve as an advisor. They could not survive. It was the stupidest strategy in the world. If we had recalled all of those people around Kabul, Fortress Kabul, out to Jalalabad, so you have, the dam, and you have the Sarobi Dam, and you have everything to the east there. You have the border with Pakistan, the Panjshir Valley. That's a strong. If we had if the Afghan government, Jaroa, the government of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, if they had said, we're in a desperate situation and we're unable to defend the expanse of our territory. But we can withdraw. Yes, it's a terrible thing because we leave some of our people to the mercy of the Taliban and the hinterlands. But we are going to secure this area and slowly work our way out. I think that is a strategy maybe that could have resulted in winning. I think that we need to redefine what we mean by a democratic Afghanistan. Not every culture necessarily takes the same approach to democracy that we do, which is to say that some places just like a strong man. That's just a thing that works for some people. I lived with the Afghans for a long time, and they are not like you. They are different than you. They're not bad. I'm not throwing spears at them, but they're just different. And anyway, where am I going with this? Yeah, dude, we could have gotten something out of Afghanistan that was better than what we got. What we got was a national disgrace. We got a humiliation. We got, the same images of that Huey in Hanoi with people falling off of it. That's what we got out of Kabul. And it was terrible, by the way. It was much worse than that. It was much worse than the fall of Saigon. I said, oh no, I'm in Saigon. Yeah, dude, we could have gotten something better if we had been more realistic about it, but we weren't realistic about it. We didn't want the optics. The whole reason we abandoned Bagram, which was a strategically defensible location, the reason we abandoned it is because we had an artificial cap on the number of people in country. And we said, well, we can't both simultaneously support the security for the embassy at Kabul and, 45, 50 miles north, support Bagram. So it's one or the other. It got to that point based on the number of people. And so pick one. And the decision was made to pick, leaving Bagram to the Afghans and going to HKIA, Hamid Karzai International Airport, based purely on, well, it would look really bad if we abandoned the embassy early. And so because of short-term optics, we chose to forego long-term strategy. That's the story of the global war on terror. It was a stupid decision. It blew up in our face in a spectacular fashion. So do I think we could have won in Afghanistan by your original definition? No, probably not. But something more measured was achievable there. And certainly the spectacular failure that we experienced was not inevitable. That was a result of human decisions.
I think that is a phenomenal way of putting that. And the parallels there to Vietnam and McNamara and counting in the numbers obsession, which drives political decisions, because that's exactly what this is. I do think that, as you alluded to, we could have gotten something at a minimum of a strategic win out of there, whether that had been just semi-regional stability in that country. If you fall back, like as you mentioned, you put it very eloquently, but with a small contingent force, I think, you could tamp things down. Who knows what's going to rear its ugly head out of there in the next year, 5 years. But
yeah, exactly.
It's a cesspool, and we're going to have to deal with it again, unfortunately. Yeah.
You know what would have helped early on? I think if we had been less prideful in thinking that our enemy was terrorism. The global war on terror, by phrasing it like that, that's meaningless. What is terror? There's always going to be a terrorist somewhere. Look at the Tamil Tigers. They're localized to Sri Lanka, the Shining Path, localized to Peru. There are terrorists everywhere. We're not going to defeat a tactic. But what we could do is we could have defined our enemy a little bit better. Our enemy was internationally minded, expansionist Islamic terrorists, people who were willing to and had the capacity to go international, to threaten us at home, to do the nightclub thing in Paris, the Bali bombings, like expand fundamental, radical, violent jihad internationally. If we had said these are the people that are our enemies, and sort of left domestic politics to domestic politics, I think that would have been something that we can win. And by the way, we did a great job smashing those people. We did a phenomenal job smashing those people. You remember after 9/11, everybody said it's not a matter of if, but when we experienced the second 9/11. And while we did have domestic terrorist attacks, they were kind of lone wolf things, the nightclub shooting, the underwear bomber, the thing in Boston, the guy down at Fort Hood who was inspired by a cleric in Yemen. We had some things, but we didn't have anything on the scale of 9/11. And our enemy absolutely intended to do something on the scale of 9/11 again and again and again, because they're evil and they hated us. And we smashed them ruthlessly. There were people, and I got to be around them, and I'm very thankful for that. There were people who did anything and everything for years, ate whatever sacrifice was required of them in order to kill our nation's enemies, to protect, school kids in Des Moines, and to make sure that some mom in Kansas isn't blown up. And that's not hyperbole. Our enemies had that intent, but there is a finite number of people who are sophisticated enough to be internationally savvy and, work the finances that are required and the bomb making skills that are required and the connections to local mosques to do that. There's not an infinite number of people who could do that. There is a very small number of people who could do that. And great people at the agency found them, worked their contacts, built a target deck, and then just ruthlessly worked through that target deck, no matter where it was, with the right authorities. And I'm super happy that I could be around some of those people and be part of some of those things. And that was a win in the global war on terror. Unfortunately, it turns out that there's a near infinite number of people who grew up in Najaf and, are able to wield an AK and sit on the corner of, first Najaf and second Najaf Street. You know what I'm saying? And so if we had maybe scaled down the scope of our adversaries to something more measured, I think we could have been more successful than we were. What do you think? What do you think about that?
I think that's a great way to put it. If you also look other places in the world, some of the places you might have been or might not have been, it's almost using you're using precision to remove those people who have the capabilities or have the mindsets or the desires to attack Americans, Europeans abroad, outside of their neighborhood, right? It's not just the person who's sitting on the street corner that is an insurgent that doesn't like its government, and then we happen to be there, right or wrong, but using the surgical precision of finding the real people who are engaged in international terrorism or international who want to go forth and conquer any or kill any infidel by any means possible and rain terror. You use a surgical approach, and again, you're going to use the authorities that are approved, et cetera, but it's going to expand past the boundaries of just one country. But you can't go in there with a sledgehammer every single time, and you're rolling in with the 101st. And the 82nd Airborne and doing these, and here's 100,000 MRAPs going down the street. Maybe there's a time and place for that, but I think Afghanistan, I was actually just watching, Netflix just put out a thing maybe 2 weeks ago, but it's talking about the horsemen up there in the northern part, talking about the CIA guys going in there and doing some of that targeting. It's like, by doing surgical strikes and removing the people, it's a balance of getting too large, right? Because once the machine gets to be so large, then you're almost creating more work in and of itself.
Yes.
And then when you're pissing off, like when you kill so-and-so and it pisses off, 20 more people, and then you kill, it's like, it's repeating and growing and spawning. Like,
all right.
This is one thing I've said.
Now we get to a really fun part of the conversation, because I'm going to tell you something that is highly controversial. Okay. But I've done a bunch of stuff, and here's my conclusion. People can take it right, wrong, and different, but here's what I think. I agree with you. Surgical, precise mechanisms of killing the right people, that's the way to get after it. But why did we fail? Because we did fail. I think we failed because we were so ate up with our precision capacity that we didn't understand that sometimes you do need a sledgehammer. And so the ability for us to balance between those two, I think there was no political will to do it. It is not the clean, eloquent solution, but it is a solution. The most dangerous, most stupidest thing that you can do is to start with violence and then say, oh, I don't want to go all the way. I'm going to take my hand off. Because then they say to themselves, well, we can put up with that. And to the Taliban's credit, they took everything we threw at them, and we threw a lot of stuff at them. You asked me what I was doing 14 August. We threw everything we could at them. As they got more aggressive, the length of our leash lengthened. The length of our leash increased.
Yeah.
That's probably a smarter way to say it. We attacked more as we saw the thing falling. And so I spent the week prior to the fall of Kabul engaged in an epic slay fest as we tried anything to stop the fall of Kabul. And it resulted in us making a series of foolish decisions, whereas the Taliban, the line Taliban commander was completely synced with the senior Taliban commander, who was the recipient of the high-value individual HVT targeting campaign, right? They were both completely synced. The guy who was storming the Afghan FOB, the regular foot soldier, was 100% synced in his mentality of, I got to go all the way, with the senior guy sitting at the council in Pakistan, because they were both equally targets. And so, and that the same was not true for us. So I think that we're just bad at violence. I mean, we got people who can wield it well.
So I would agree with you. I had General Holmes, who's the ACC commander on this. I asked him a question tying to why this did not work. But he goes, it's somewhere down the road, and it senior policy, right? I mean, he's 4-star. But there was the thing, we don't want to end up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times that we killed someone. So we started taking this like, well, that's when we show up with GBU-38 V5s with no collateral damage, right? Because we're only going to hit this one person. The flip side, I think we were talking beforehand, right? The difference of going into Operation Inherent Resolve in Iraq and Syria. There, my experience was the gloves were off. My first time I dropped was via data link message. And it was just, if you see any military age man, if you see a vehicle, just drop on it. Like there was no talk to anyone, just go do it. Like that because the world was responding and it was acceptable, right? At that time, people couldn't imagine that, individuals would behead and line people up and wrap det cord around their necks and video it and blow it up and do Hollywood cinematic films about it. So the appetite that they must be eradicated from the earth by any means necessary, but that wanes, in the public eye, and then policymakers tend to accept that. But I would agree. If you want to solve violent, people respond to violence. That's the language. And saying the on-off switch, if you're the person on the receiving end, it's not a rheostat. It's not like, well, maybe just a little bit of this. Like, it's life or death.
Yeah.
When it comes down to
you know what, brother? And that's where I do blame our generals. And I'm not here to throw spears at people unwarrantedly, but I do blame them for that. They accepted constraints where we should not have had constraints. And I've heard their answer to this. Their answer is, well, if I didn't accept those constraints, I'd be fired. And my answer is, yeah, then you'd be fired. That's correct. We don't need our general officers to, fly overhead an objective and put a laser on it. We don't need our general officers to be a spotter on the ground in Kunar province for a sniper team. We don't need them to line up in a stack and throw a flashbang in or rush in and cover the northeast corner while somebody else takes the south. We don't need that kind of tactical risk-taking on the part of our generals. What we do need on the part of our military leadership is a moral risk-taking. We need them to say, I can't accept this because this thing you're putting on me, politicians, is ultimately putting more risk on our forces and threatening our objective. And so I can't accept it. And if you want to fire me for that, then that's okay. Fire me for that. But they wouldn't do it. It's socially awkward. Their peers would look down on them. Somebody else would replace them right away. Guess what? We're all replaceable. But they just wouldn't do it. Not a single general ever said, I can't in good conscience continue this. Instead, all of them said, victory is right around the corner, guys. Just give me another billion, you know? And shame on them. Shame on them. So yeah, I when I look back on that time and on everything that I did and on what I saw people sacrifice, I am proud of the people I got to be around, but I am left with a lingering sense of anger because the failure was not inevitable. The failure was a result of people who were too afraid to take risk. While people overhead the objective or on the objective were taking extreme tactical risk, the people leading them were not taking personal risk. It was embarrassing. I don't want to be the guy who, gets fired after 2 months in command. I don't want to do that.
Right.
And so we just had a bunch of yes men our way to failure. So maybe there's some value in analyzing what happened and why it happened. And maybe I'm wrong about this. Maybe my analysis is off point. Maybe it's too emotional. That's fine. But I think, brother, if we start, if people who have been there and done that can at least start a conversation about what happened, with the foundation of we didn't achieve our objective. We said we were going to do one thing. That thing didn't happen successfully. Why? Maybe that's an honest, fair way to start the conversation. There's a bunch of different answers. I've got an opinion, but my opinion might be wrong. I tend to blame things that I think I understand. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm off base. But I think not having the conversation and just forgetting it and rushing to the next problem set is a recipe for future disaster.
I wonder, this is like to play devil's advocate, and I'm trying to put, because I agree with what you're saying. But the flip side of it would be if the military ran it, I don't think it would have gone down the way it did. I think the military said, no, hey, we're going to fall back to this geographic area and we're going to hold this territory because it provides a strategic importance to us or whatever it might be. But we're definitely not going to tell them when we're going to leave. We're going to leave on our own terms, or we're going to draw down on our own terms. But I think the political decision that, hey, we're drawing a line in the sand and it's the 31st of August and we're going to be out, and sorry, we're hustling to get everyone out of here. Sorry, Taliban. Like, we capitulated to the enemy's needs and desires. And that was all political. We let politics drive that fight, which is never a good strategic nor tactical. It doesn't, when it flows from the strategic down to the tactical level, when it's generated out of politics, I don't think it works out well. And I don't know. Everything's driven by politics.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, what did Claus would say? War is politics by other means, right? So it's interesting. It's an interesting, intractable problem, if you will. You can't divorce politics from war. It's very easy for us as military people to just sort of put the war in a box and say, everybody just leave me alone. Just let me focus on just, doing this war thing. But the war thing is happening in real time. Do you remember when we had some things at Abu Ghraib prison where some, very junior, untrained people acted completely unprofessionally? This is Iraq. And I want to say, I could be wrong. It seemed like 05, 06 maybe. I don't know.
I was going to say probably 2005, 2006.
Yeah, something around. Maybe it was 04. Yeah. I don't know. But the bottom line is the war and the optics around it sort of took this turn. Like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? And, the pictures that came out of that were atrocious and they were absurd. But that had such a massive strategic impact. Like, now all of a sudden we're letting people go. We're sending them to the Iraqis, and then the nascent Iraqi army, which, didn't have the capacity to keep people in jails. And so they were we're capturing people on objectives. We're letting them go because we can't send them to Abu Ghraib, or then we're sending people to Abu Ghraib, but what are all the checks and balances? And the enemy is exploiting every weakness. So I don't know. I mean, I'd love to say, yeah, let's just solve the problem that's given to us, and, everybody just butt out, let the military do military things. But that's not the reality of the world that we live in. Our nation and our taxpayers don't want us to just sort of go on and do it without any oversight. And, we'll tell them when it's done. They don't want that. And so we need to develop strategies that don't assume that's our operating environment, because that's not our operating environment. Now, what those strategies are, I don't know. You know, so
Well, I mean,
why it's
it's
so
a give
hard.
and take. You wouldn't be there without politics
Yeah.
and vice versa. And I've said that too elsewhere on the podcast too. It's like it does go back and forth. You know, a wingman, private first class.
Yeah.
You know, at that level, they can impact at the strategic level with a stupid mistake. And if we look at the Russians right now, well, I just actually released it in my newsletter. It came out a year later. 2 Su-27s, 2-ship. One of them shoots 2 missiles at a RC-135 rivet joint.
Yeah.
Royal Air Force.
Was this the British thing?
So,
This is the British thing?
yeah, British thing, right? But, you know, and the Brits accepted the Russians' initial claim that it was malfunction, right? But now
They
they're
did publicly,
releasing the
yeah.
the transcripts of what's going on. And this wingman or flight lead is slinging 2 Alamos or Archers at this rivet joint. But that is a dude who's probably 30, 35 years old, 25 years old. That could start World War III. You know,
I know a guy who missed the #1 target in the world because 5 seconds prior to impact, prior to a munition impacting his speeding vehicle, this dude, who was a second lieutenant at the time, elected to switch his symbology from white hot to black hot. And when he did that, because he was white hot and he had white symbology, and he was like, I can't see the crosshairs. And when he did that, he moved his laser off target, and the low collateral weapon impacted aft of the vehicle and, you know, damaged it, but didn't destroy it. And that's just how that went down. And so when you talk about the strategic implications of a single dude making a single decision, I mean, that was a thumb movement at the last minute, but it was at a critical point in time, at a critical point in our nation's history when lots of very important things were happening, and it had an outsized impact. It made us look incompetent and stupid on a very high senior strategic level, and it affected all kinds of stuff. I mean, there were ripples of that, and he's just some dude, man. He's just some 26-year-old dude that made a error, you know? And, I mean, there are a lot of questions there. Why was he the person that was overhead that objective? You know, I mean, should everything hinge on that? I don't know. There's all kinds of fun things to talk about with that one, but at the end of the day, politics and optics drives what we do. So I get that. What I would have liked to see from our military leadership is a pushing back against the idea that war can be precise and clean all the time. I would have liked to see our leadership accept that maximum violence and attrition is our path to success, advocate that, allow me to do it. You know, people who can and will and are willing to eat the sacrifices, there are lots of us, allow us to do it, and then accept if things go wrong, or if, you know, someone says, hey, you're being a baby killer, or whatever. I mean, I would have liked them to say, look, man, if you want us to attrit the enemy to the point where they are not driving our strategy, we are driving our strategy, it's going to look ugly. And we have people who will do ugliness on your behalf, but we have to let them do it. I would have much rather have seen that in retrospect than seeing just the constant barriers. I mean, sitting on a target for a month and then finally get the chance, and, you know, by then you hit him, but what's the opportunity cost of all the targets you pass up to hit him? You know, I mean, that is what I wish I would have seen in retrospect, but, you know, hindsight's 2020.
It always is. Always is. All right. I want to pivot. Let's talk some flying stories. So let's go back. I want to jump into Afghanistan, the 15th and the 16th. Can you tell me what that day was like? What's going on? What kind of, it
was wild, there? Dude. So we'd been hitting targets, cause you know, we partner with RPAs and lots of other flying assets. And so we'd been just, ruthlessly striking targets, right up into the suburbs of Kabul, up until the 15th. Actually, I landed the morning of the 15th, and I woke up about 5 hours later, and I'm the squadron commander and the site commander, because it was, you know, we have a lot of responsibilities everywhere, and I knew it was going down. I was an advisor, so I was still in touch with the Afghans there, which was wild because they were feeding me a constant stream of intel about, you know, every single nuance and detail of how it was going down. we were looking heavily at the dam and the areas out east. Turns out the Parwan prison was pretty much the main thing, should have been focused on more. And we were focused on that. But we were looking everywhere with minimum assets because most of the assets that we had were driven out of theater because we didn't have the means to support them anymore once Bagram went down. So anyway, I'm based in HKIA. I'm living in Kabul, HKIA being Hamid Karzai International Airport. It's the single runway airport in the north side of Kabul. And I went to sleep on the morning of the 15th. And probably 4 or 5 hours later, I woke up with the sirens going off, the air raid sirens going off and explosions and stuff. And I was like, okay, dude, this is it. It's going down. Because I'd been watching it. I mean, for a week, I'd been watching it and I knew it was going down. And so I woke up, I ran to the TOC, which is about a mile and a half away. I go in, TOC, Tactical Operations Center. Sorry, I don't want to be all acronym heavy.
Yeah, that's good.
You know how we speak.
Yeah, everyone's like, what does that mean? Like, yeah, well, I'll try to get to it.
I was living somewhere that was not where I was working. And I had to,
I had to run to work.
Yeah.
Had to run to the corner office.
Anyway, I get in there and sure enough, it's going down. The enemy is, they've been building up their storehouses of munitions all around the perimeter of the city. They came in primarily, there were 2 highways to the south of Kabul that were kind of in parallel, leading up through Logar province and a place called Maidan Shar. That's what it was. So Maidan Shar on sort of the southwest of Kabul, and then the highway from Patika through Muhammad Aga, Logar province on sort of the southeastern side of Kabul. Those 2 main lines of communication running up, the enemy was just massively building up storehouses down there and overtaking friendly positions that had artillery. And that was key to us, is once the enemy takes over those artillery pieces and we have those D-30s pointed at Kabul, dude, total game changer. Artillery is, as airmen, we don't think about the slot. You probably do as a fighter guy, doing deconfliction with gun target lines. But for all the non-kinetic people out there who might be listening to this, artillery is an absolute lethal destroyer of all things on the battle space. So watch out for artillery. Okay, but artillery starts getting pointed at you.
Those are big old bullets.
Oh, dude, they're big bullets. There's a lot of them. It's easy to shoot a lot. That's a game changer on the ground. So we saw.
Were you guys? Was the advance? I mean, was it like mass crowds, like rolling down the street, or are they like operating like small man teams, just overtaking this stuff?
The Taliban is so good. They were so good and so professional. They maintained their small man teams. Small man teams is what I've been killing for years. But there were just a lot of them. You couldn't look around without seeing them. There were small man teams everywhere. And that presented a target, right? That's the thing about ISIS that was so lovely in the original re-invasion of Iraq, is that ISIS made themselves an open target, bunch of idiots. And guess what happens when you present yourself to a professional force like us as an open target? Yeah, you want to be in a 100 vehicle convoy. That lasts about 1 day when you've got fighters overhead, right? With the authority to shoot anybody in a 100 vehicle convoy flying ISIS flags. Same sort of thing. So it became readily apparent that all these FOBs were fallen, Afghan forward operating bases, right up until the edge of the city, even into southern outskirts of Kabul. And they were building up warehouses. They were moving artillery pieces in. They were, structure strikes were authorized. That's rare, as you know, because you don't know who's in that structure. Turns out a lot of people and a lot of secondaries. But anyway, as they were doing that, it was just obvious, man. I mean, you've flown combat sorties, you've dropped, you get it. You look down and you're like, this is the thing. This is it. There's a mass of them now, and they're all surrounding me. Then the morning of the 15th, when I slept for a couple hours, I rolled into the Tactical Operations Center. I got the updates, and at that time, they were also making a movement to the north. The Parwan prison, which was on the eastern side of Bagram, was falling. They were making a concerted effort to that. Well, you got 4,000 enemy combatants inside the Parwan prison. When that falls, and by the way, the enemy has truckloads of small arms that they can instantly deliver to these people. Now you got a 2-pronged assault, Combine that, to the west side of Kabul is a bunch of mountains that don't really go anywhere. You can't escape. To the east side of Kabul is the highway that goes through the valley to Jalalabad through Nangarhar province, which is completely controlled by ISIS. I mean, you're in a hurt spot. So I knew that we were in a hurt spot. So I go to talk and I'm like, okay, what's going on? Get the update. Okay, do they need me to launch now? Is the question. I have no crew rest, but this looks like an emergency. What do you think? So I called up my authorities and they were like, it's an emergency. Throw everything you got right now. So I go, I get my crew, we launch, total chaos. When I say total chaos, man, I mean, going to the airplane. Have you ever been to Kabul?
I've only flown over it.
Okay. Well, you heard, I'm sure, that it's HKIA was a NATO base. It was one of the nicer places in theater. There's lots of shops. There was a Thai food place. Kabul wasn't a bad place to be.
And it was kind of hodgepodge together too, right? Like different compounds. Yeah. Like if you go to almost like Bagram was a base in my mind.
Yeah.
Kandahar was still also kind of hodgepodge together, but also more, I'd say more of a base like structure just with different compounds, but Kabul was more spread out.
Yeah. Kabul was more spread out. HKIA refers to a lot of things. I would have to take like an armored convoy between some of the places. So the special mission wing was on the southwest side of the airfield. But there was a perimeter road that was not guarded and frequently attacked. The U.S. and NATO forces were on the north side. The south side of the airfield was like the commercial airport, which had okay security sometimes and not okay other times. But there were a lot of like open areas to the city. And it's just a single runway, east-west runway. I want to say like 2911 kind of thing. I'm not sure. I could be wrong. But yeah, bottom line, a hodgepodge of places, lots of stuff. As I'm moving from the TOC, from like my base where I'm getting intel out to the aircraft and where they're parked, which I think was ramp 8, I mean, chaos, dude. It was obvious. It's really interesting to be in a crowd of people that knows the end is here. I'd experienced it before in Africa, but this was like on a massive scale. And it's just a unique sort of energy to the air. But third country nationals, people who like, work in the shops and clean the toilets, are like picking up objects and smashing windows and stealing things inside, like total chaos. Okay. Like everything that can be stolen is stolen. The chow hall done. At the time, COVID was still like a thing, allegedly, whatever. So like we have to we're supposed to wear masks when we're walking around. You remember all that? Nobody was wearing a mask. Like mask. If that tells you anything, okay. Yeah. All of the make-believe rules that structure society are gone when a genuine threat presents itself, unless a society is strong. And this was just, the Afghans working there just went crazy. The people who, had always had their eye on something in the German tactical store, or always wanted that sweet Norwegian, outer shell that, they just broke the window and stole it. And it was like, okay, well, I'm not going to stop and do anything. I'm going to go to my plane and take off and go to the embassy. But it was really interesting to have that drive while just chaos is engulfing around you. And you're like, this is it, man. So we get to the plane, do a quick walk around. There's just massive shooting everywhere. I peek over to the other ramp where the Afghans were. And I sent you a picture of me and one of the Afghans meeting. We had met like 2 days prior. The commander of the AC-208 attack squadron there. We had met right there. And he was freaking out because he felt it too. And so I peek over and I just kind of see where all the planes are. I think I sent you a video of the planes afterwards and the aftermath too. And there are Afghans shooting at each other on the ramp, having a like engaged in a firefight, like right there in front of me, because some of them are stealing airplanes and trying to escape the impending fall of the city. And some of them are like the security guys at the checkpoints were like, no, you can't do that. And so they're like trading fire. And I'm like doing my walk around, man,
Yeah, you did those pictures. There's some like there's Afghan who's sitting in this 208, and I was wondering because it's showing him. It's like right behind the cockpit.
Oh yeah.
He's sitting.
That's an RPK round.
So
yeah. Don't worry about that.
Yeah,
one.
actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe he's maintainers. Yeah, I assume too. Like we jumped over. So I'm interrupting this story, but you probably during your 208 days knew a lot of these
Yeah, dude, I
Afghans
knew them all.
that are in this.
I knew
Yeah,
them all. And
yeah.
I'm hitting them up, by the way, for intel also. I'm like, hey, we're looking at the Sarobi Dam. Like, should I be looking there? Because I'm thinking I should be looking south. And they're like, oh no. Because I mean, it's really interesting. They got somebody who went to, school with this other guy, and he knows a guy in the Taliban, and he's here with all his friends. And so I'm like, and I did this in 2020 as well. I was like hitting them up, like, I need you to tell me everything you know about where there are people I can target, because I'm here to target people. And so they'd feed me stuff, and I'd go out there and I'd see things that matched it, and I'd give it to my boss, and things would work through. So anyway, I'm talking to these guys. I look around the corner and I see this ongoing firefight, and I see these guys like jumping in planes, like taxiing away all crazy. And I'm like, all right, get some, So we get in our plane and we're taxiing out, and I call ground to taxi. Ground's done. They just abandoned.
Strange.
Yeah, they abandoned the tower. They're done. So I'm like, cool. Well, let's go anyway, because it's we're evacuating the embassy, and we need somebody overhead the embassy to coordinate fires and to do security. I had done some coordination for the Benghazi response, and in my mind was like, dude, like, no, we're attack, fangs out, like we're not. I'm not going to be told no again. And so we're just going for it, man. And so there's like Afghans riding cars, crashing into each other on the taxiway. It was bananas. I go down and I see there were some combat control guys that were starting to set up a little card table, and I stop next to them, and I'm like, hey, dude, what do you think? I'm just going to go. What do you think? And they're like, man, just go for it. This is our frequency. I don't know what to tell you. Everything is crazy. Do whatever you want to do. And I'm like, well, I want to go fight. So we take off, and, low altitude, heavy weight. We're getting tons of small arms. We're getting tons of, and I mean, it's daytime, and I'm seeing tracers, and I get an RPG, and we're kind of jinking. And you got to find out amount of energy. I mean, I'm not a fighter, right? In a fighter, you could probably do all kinds of stuff, vertical takeoff. No, man, I'm in a overweight U-28, and I got a couple of turns, got a couple hundred ATL before me and the ground are going to have a conversation. So it's like, all right, dude, game on, man. So we did that thing and got out, and it was a super fun, sort of dramatic, ultra low level, if you will, until I could find a place over the downtown to kind of peel off in the mountains and climb. And all the time we're setting up comms with the embassy and the forces doing that thing. And so we go over there. I don't want to get into a lot of it because I honestly don't know what is worth talking about on a podcast, but there was some crazy stuff that went down over at the embassy. We saw embassy people being taken out, like Afghans who worked at the embassy, taken out, put in these corridors by the Taliban, and they were just beating on them, just butt stroking them. They were shooting at the embassy, and it was like, and I was there with a bunch of RPAs, and it was like who are all loaded up, and it was like, all right, dude, like let's get some, and we were told no, we're not going to get any, because it's not going to. Like, just wait, just keep waiting, keep building the situation. So anyway, I talked to him, and I was like, look, man, there's a point where I'm going to make a decision. And that point never came, frankly. And I'll just leave it at that. It was an interesting thing.
At this point too, how many embassy employees roughly? I mean,
oh, dude, yeah, I don't know. I can't distinguish between the U.S. I will say the embassy evacuation lasted all day and all night. And I was there for it along with some other folks, and that's awesome. But there were also a lot of like Afghans that worked at the embassy who were being kicked out, and the Taliban was like, they were roughing them up, but they weren't killing. And that's very important. They weren't killing them. They were taking some pot shots at the embassy, but they weren't like assaulting the embassy, if that makes sense. So they put up a perimeter, they harassed them, they did some harassing fire. And so the situation never exceeded the threshold for us to attack. I think if we had attacked, it would have been a total bloodbath, because again, they had artillery pointed everywhere at us. And so we didn't. And so I don't know what was going on behind the scenes, but there must have been something happening behind the scenes, because it didn't go any further than that. But we don't know this at the time. So we're posturing, we're getting ready. And then I'm told, hey, go look at the parliament real fast. So we look at the parliament, which are only like a mile away. And there was a massive convoy of Afghan army folks who were surrendering real time to the Taliban, who were all flying their flags. Again, it's daytime, so I could see them. And we're like, oh my gosh, well, what does that mean? What's going on? There was this thing called the CSAR, which is a very unfortunate acronym because I know that means Combat Search and Rescue to you. That's not what it means in Afghanistan. Yeah. It meant Combined Situational Awareness Room or something like that. But it's basically, we had a bunch of Afghans who acted as the go-between from us doing strikes to vet that we weren't striking Afghans. So like I look down or somebody looks down, whoever looks down, and they're like, oh, this looks like an enemy. Okay, well, guess what? The enemy looks exactly the same as the friendlies because the enemy has stolen all of the equipment and uniforms from the friendlies. So there was a cell of people that were Afghans that were on Roshan cell phone networks calling the Afghans at this forward operating base or whatever and saying, hey, are you out walking, right here northbound right now? Or do you ever patrol out? Oh, you don't? Okay, cool. And they would act as sort of a decon. Well, those guys just, as soon as President Ghani gave up the ghost and left Afghanistan and flew away with his millions, like a little bitch, by the way, but as soon as he left, those guys left as well. So we had no more mechanism to deconflict fires. So it became very challenging. So then we see Afghan forces that we paid with our MRAPs that we gave them and Humvees surrendering to the Taliban. I'm being told that the Taliban are inside of the parliament live streaming on Twitter that they had taken, now known as X, that they had taken over, over the government. The president left. Our embassy is being harassed, but not being assaulted. They're allowing us to exfiltrate, but the whole thing is very tenuous. There were some Marines that were getting in, like, no kidding, firefights in the city. I mean, people were trading, U.S. soldiers and Marines were trading fire with the Taliban on a onesie-twosie basis, but we didn't know how big it was going to get. So there were lethal firefights happening in the city. So bottom line, total chaos. And we're like, this is, so we're doing our thing, which I don't want to get too in depth on. And as this is happening, especially after the live stream in the parliament, there's this massive crowd that's building up, streaming from all over the city to a couple of highways that approach HKIA, just full of cars. People are getting out. And when I say massive, I mean thousands. I sent you a picture of like one of the gates with all those people. So, I'm not good at judging people, but we came up with this methodology of like doing a certain field of view and then, segmenting that into a smaller section, counting the number of heads, and then extrapolating that for white. So using that mechanism, which is imprecise, I'll grant, but using that mechanism, somewhere around 10,000 people started gathering to the south side of HKIA and pushing in. And, we're looking for threats. I'm coordinating with another U-28. Like, it's crazy, man. Stuff is going on. I might have battle damage because we took a bunch of fire taken off, so I'm like, all right, dude, what's happening here? And suddenly the Afghan military protecting HKIA starts shooting into the crowd. I mean, like multiple machine gun checkpoints, full auto into the crowd. The crowd surges, massive stampede, mass casualty event, people getting trampled to death. I mean, mass casualty event, all northbound, surge through the terminal. And my big concern is, are there enemies in here? Because I'm not the smartest man, so it took me a while to determine that this is civilians running away. This isn't, the enemy doing. I kept expecting like a massive enemy invasion, but it wasn't that. And so now it might seem obvious. At the time, it was not obvious. It took me a second to realize what's happening. So once that happens, dude, I reach out to a bunch of our rescue bubbas who are in a talk, in a separate talk from mine in HKIA on a frequency that I was not using or working with. And I just cold call them. And I'm like, this is coming your way. I'm seeing them surge through, just overrun civilian airliners. I mean, thousands and thousands of people trampling on top of soldiers shooting them. Like, this is happening. But I don't see in the crowd, and I was very, very hesitant to say this, but I had to say it because who knows what's going to happen. I did not see any guns in the crowd.
I'm looking at that picture. We'll put that up when we edit the podcast. The sheer mass of people
That was wild,
that
dude.
are
Yeah.
at this
This is,
wall.
this is a zombie
there's
apocalypse, man. This is a zombie apocalypse.
That's the way to put it. Like, there's no room in between people. There's no room whatsoever, and they're all just mashed against it. So I can envision, or I think I can envision, like this thing breaking through and going would just be pure insanity.
Yeah. So dude,
Wow.
I reach out, and this is going to sound stupid, but I was very concerned that our guys would start shooting civilians, not because they're bad, but because it's now nighttime and all of a sudden thousands of people are running at you when all day long it's been, bombs going off and machine guns all day long. And so I called down, I'm like, dude, like, just prepare yourself. But in about 10 minutes, this is happening to you. But I think they're all civilians. I don't see a threat, but this is happening. So I don't know. I hope that made a difference. I don't know if it made a difference, but we made that radio call, and then it's like, okay, I'm like emergency bingo. Like I'm well below bingo. I'm emergency fuel. So then it's like, well, what am I going to do? I got no diverts. The whole country has fallen to the Taliban. I'm well below emergency gas. This plane is crashing in a few minutes, and the runway is covered in people. All right, you have the aircraft.
I don't want to be here anymore.
I know.
This is terrible.
Dude, I loved it, man. It was fun. So we figured it out. I worked with another U-28. Dudes did an awesome job. We tried to land on the taxiway. The taxiway was full of dead bodies, and like a trash can that was on fire and some other crazy stuff from that stuff I talked about earlier. And I was like, I could probably, we found like this, we're running out of gas, but those dudes found us like a strip of concrete that I could land on there. So I was like lined up on final to land on it. And I'm on final and I'm on goggles and I can't see anything because the approach lights are just completely washing me out. Like the lights of the city of Kabul, dude, I was totally washed out. And so they were looking overhead, looking down, and, we found that gap that we were talking about earlier. But yeah, there's just this gap in the crowd opened up and I could kind of sidestep. I did not have gas to go around. I probably had 90 seconds worth of fuel remaining, and that's gauge error, Yeah, dude.
A wobble.
Yeah, that's a wobble. So, flame out any moment, but we were able to just sidestep. So I kind of put some rudder in, top rudder, and coasted from the taxiway onto the runway. Some dudes there running across, definitely got a haircut. But was able to set it down short field right in the middle of everyone, which is pretty wild. We taxied back. We RTB'd. My bros had taken off. They were overhead. Then we get back and we get this call like, hey, I know that was pretty wild, but we need you to go again. We need to double turn, take off, and get after it one more time because, shit's still going down. So we did. Dude, I was smoked. I made some changes to the crew. I took a guy in the back, my SEL, who was an awesome dude. I took him not because the senior airman who was with me did anything wrong. He didn't. But I mean, I had no crew rest. Now I've got double no crew rest. Now I'm like on the 20, I'm like on hour 24. It's now the 2 a.m. I woke up at 7 a.m., but we got approved for a high risk mission, without any crew rest to go double turn through what we just landed in, to go do it again. And we assumed we couldn't land a second time. So we found a place to crash sort of in the wilderness and just kind of fight/evade our way back to Kabul. So I took my SEL with me because I was like, bro, I'm not making smart decisions. I'm tired. I want you to QC me to make sure I don't do something terrible, but this is the game plan. I can't believe we got it approved, but once they said approved, then I kind of knew this is it, man, so we went out, we did it a second time. It was all good. Definitely had some wild things happen that time as well. We land and then I think one plane landed behind us, and then it was it. We were down. There were just too many refugees. They overwhelmed our hangar. They were sitting on our planes. We couldn't taxi out anymore without taxiing into them. So we kind of put pause on operations for about a day. And then I didn't even know the war was over, dude. I slept pretty hard. I woke up, realized that we didn't have any food. That the hospital was closed. I had a guy with stitches. I had another guy with some other problems. So it was like time to put together a squad of people to go pilfer whatever we could, which was awesome. So just put together a team with hammers and go break into anywhere and like steal whatever supplies you can in order to continue, because get ready. So after a day of taking a knee and stealing air conditioners and vehicles, we were ready to rock and roll again. And then I found out the war was over, and I was like, what? So then we had to shift from go attack to go protect the perimeter of HKIA, and everything that entailed. And so that was pretty weird, but yeah, we did it. So yeah.
Well, and super humble. You got a Distinguished Flying Cross, rewarded the Distinguished Flying Cross for that. And there's a lot going into it. I'll just read the snippet here, which I did chuckle a little bit, but when it comes into the landing, Colonel McIntyre used night vision goggles and infrared sensors to execute a perilous and unprecedented feat of airmanship by landing between a moving gap in the crowd. Despite I'm just seeing like wild, this mass. That's the way to put it. It was wild. So when we share the picture, then people can envision just this massive herd of people, and you're landing your U-28 in between these people. Insanity.
Yeah, you know what though, man? No drama, easy to do. I've never done that before. Obviously, I don't know anybody who's ever even contemplated doing something like that before. But like we were talking about earlier, this is a culture that always looks for the next challenge, that always finds the weirdest, hardest runway to land at, that always says, okay, but can you do it higher? Can you do it when you're tired? Can you do it when you haven't eaten all day? Can you do it when you have diarrhea? Can you do it when the weather's terrible? I mean, like pile challenge on top of challenge on top of challenge. And then can you go still kill the target and safely recover in the worst possible conditions? And the answer is yes, I can. And it's not because I'm special. It's not because I'm a great pilot. I'm not. It's because I'm around great people and a great culture. And so that's what I'll say for the U-28. It's a great group of people and a great culture. And they're ready for any challenge that the nation needs us to do.
Talk to me about the last basically 2 weeks there. So after you wake up on the 16th or 17th there, now it's more base defense. Dude, everything, yeah. I think, kind of stabilized, right? Stabilized, I use that term loosely.
Yeah.
But Abey Gate bombing, that happened. That obviously injected a lot of chaos. Any involvement or dealings like with Abey Gate bombing?
And
what you guys
I
put
a whole crew in for the Abey Gate. They did an amazing job. I was on station after them. It was a very wild time. It's funny. You can say things stabilized when you have no food except whatever expired MREs you can find under somebody's mattress in a place, a mile away from you that you have to break into. And by the way, it has Taliban inside of it. So you got to go and protect yourself. There's wild animals there. The situation was completely crazy. Our support was lacking. And I'm not throwing spears at anybody. We had to exfil everybody. So I get it. But yeah, the team did an awesome job sustaining. We were able to sustain 24/7 ops, doing base defense, which, again, not a lot happened publicly, but I'm telling you, a lot happened. There were some great dudes, great captains that deconflicted green on blue. The Abey Gate was not the first attack that was tried. Several were interdicted. Lots of wild stuff happened. And I'm really proud of the guys and girls that were around me, that just every day pushed up, with terrible sleep, no crew rest. Bro, there were people, dying on the barbed wire fence, right next to our compound all night long, people screaming. Nobody got good sleep. We're by the North Gate, thousands of people all night being trampled, gunshots constantly, sporadic comms with your family. There were so many dead people. They filled up every single freezer. They came and tried to put them in my freezer. My freezer was like small, but it was a walk-in freezer. I kept some fruit there for the people. I didn't want to fill it up with dead bodies, but screaming constantly, wailing, refugees dying. It was a brutal situation, and the team did amazing. Mostly, a couple of dudes I had to just get out of there. So we did operate with minimum people, because some people just had to leave. They just weren't cut out for that. But the team did an amazing job. I'm really, really proud of the team. Abey Gate went down. The people on station during Abey Gate did an amazing job. largest casualty evacuation, which the U-28's done hundreds of those, thousands. But the largest one in terms of the number of casualties that I knew about. I've seen some pretty gnarly mass casualty events. Once I showed up after Abey Gate, about 5 hours after it went down, I was really shocked at the scale of the bloodshed. It was Abey Gate's on the southeast side of HKIA, and it was, those super tall, like concrete barriers, that are up everywhere in every deployed location. It was just a wall of those in this corridor. And when the dude S-vested himself, the suicide vest, when he blew himself up, it camped that explosion in this very dense population, resulting in just a uniquely horrific volume of bloodshed. I didn't even know what I was looking at for the first couple hours. I was looking down at it. I was like, okay, I see a couple of people. I see some body parts. I see people collecting it. I've seen that kind of stuff in the aftermath of IEDs and stuff before. But what is this? It took me a while to realize that the Abey Gate I was looking at now was all dark, and the Abey Gate I was looking at yesterday wasn't. And the reason is it was blood from hundreds of people that was just spattered for 200 meters and up the walls. It was just totally bananas. And the crew who handled that casualty evacuation, obviously the Marines did an amazing job on the ground, but the crew did a great job too. The U-28 crew that was overhead, they were on the ground. The guy, and this happened probably a half mile south of where we were living, so we heard it, did the accountability and everything. In the air, though, they were shutting down the runway sporadically for people who were just grabbing whoever they could and whatever vehicle they could steal and move them north across the runway. But there are C-17s landing constantly, so they just took sort of airfield control on themselves to handle just random, Marines or whoever driving people in random trucks without any comms crossing an active runway. In addition to the rotary wing guys did a spectacular job just taking off and flying a half mile south and picking up whoever they could load. And so that the coordination of all those movements together was done by some of our captains, and they did a truly wonderful job. And I am convinced that people could have died but didn't, because the golden hour was preserved by multiple teams of Americans, and I'm happy that my guys were one of those teams that could be overhead and could be making sure that this casualty evacuation to the Rule 2, which was the clinic on HKIA, could happen as quickly and efficiently as possible with multiple moving pieces. I'm sure you can imagine the north-south movement of vehicles and helicopters talking to nobody, along with the east-west movement of multiple C-17s, creates a problem, and they solved that problem. And it was a problem nobody had ever envisioned. But like I said, just thinking creatively, approaching problems creatively enabled them to do so in a masterful way.
Yeah, that's impressive. Well, Sam, as we wrap up here, I want to ask for any parting shots. But before we do that, I'm hoping you're willing. I meant to mention this beforehand. I do a There I Was segment, little separate thing that I released for Patreon supporters. So if you're willing to hang around after we say goodbye here for just a few more minutes, we'll record one of those. It'll take 5-10 minutes if you got that. But I want to part with any parting shots, thoughts of wisdom. I usually ask people, if you found 15, 16-year-old walking down the street, any advice you give him, but it can be applicable to anything you see today, your career, etc. So big softball question there.
Okay. Yeah, that's a big softball, isn't it? I got a good one for you, dude. So I'm in Africa, okay, around about 2013, 2014, and I'm going after this target who's absolutely despicable, okay? His thing was to find poor people who had special needs children and buy these children to use them as suicide bombs, okay? He's just a total piece of shit human being. But that's the kind of enemy that we're fighting and killing. So, I mean, we're pulling out all the stops. I am anyway. And our team, working extra hours, staffing multiple, requests to refuel at different places. Timbuktu, Tessalit, Mauritania. Everywhere that I could go to get gas enabled me to spend longer on station. Anyway, multi-month effort to put ourselves in a position to crush this dude. And finally, that opportunity presented itself through a confluence of the entire team. And it was an all-night thing, get gas, push our way out there. The guy that I had designated to go fly the mission, I woke him up in the middle of the night. I was like, dude, it's game time. And he was like, well, first of all, I briefed him on the mission, and he was just Google eyes the whole time. And it finally was like, Sam, I just pounded an Ambien like 2 hours ago. Like I'm high as a kite, man. I'm not ready for this. So I was like, cool. So I did it. But the rest of the team was super ready. And anyway, bottom line, many months spent with a lot of effort doing something that doesn't sound sexy, just compiling a bunch of data, put ourselves in a position to finally destroy this dude. Got overhead the target with the French, burned him down, burned down all the people around him, just absolutely mercilessly destroyed him and left his body to be eaten by animals. Good. RTB'd, talking to each other about the story, telling, one of my bosses, trying to put in one of the teams who had been forward staged with, in this terrible place for a couple of days, trying to put them in for a ward. They didn't get an award. I'm bitching about it. Anyway, good buddy of mine, a guy named Matt Rowland. I was telling him about it. He was there with me. And I'm like, dude, I did all this, and I'm really proud of the team. I'm trying to get the team recognized for this thing that they did. And, it really just pulled it together. And I don't know why, but, we're not able to get recognition, which sounds petty and lame, but you know how it is. Like, you want the team to be recognized. Yep. Anyway, Matt said to me, and here's the answer to your question, softball. Matt said, yeah, that sucks. Sometimes it just happens like that, but you know what you got? What I get, Matt? And he said, you got to do it. And so here's Matt, this lieutenant, and I'm a major site commander, think that, what I'm saying? And he completely schooled me, and I was embarrassed because he was right. What you get at the end of the day, that you could show off whatever ticket you have, whatever award. I mean, dude, that all pales in comparison to the knowledge that you got to go and do the thing. And I got to do it, and I'm very, very blessed that I got to do it around just great people. I got to do something that I think was worth my best effort. I wanted to hurt the people who tried to hurt innocent Americans, and I believe that I did. And that was totally badass. So what do you get to do if you sign up to do this? Well, you get to do it, man. It sounds pedantic and redundant, but that's what you get to do. And I was very happy to do that, and blessed to do it. Matt was killed. He was murdered by the Taliban in an insider attack in 2015. And he got a Silver Star for protecting his teammates doing it. But he is an absolute hero. And those are the kind of heroes that you get to be around if you want to do this kind of thing. So I would say to any listener out there who's got the itch to get involved in what's happening and get involved in the military and get involved in special operations, do it, man. A lot of folks aren't going to understand maybe what you're doing. The sacrifices will seem weird. There's going to be times you sit around and you wait and you're like, what am I doing with myself here? I'm hurrying up to wait again. But eventually, if you try hard and you're around the right team and you're blessed, you'll get to do the thing. And there's nothing as special to doing the thing and to being around other people. We get to do that.
Sam, I appreciate it. And I appreciate Matt's quote. That's something I'll take, because it puts things in perspective, how easy things get lost in perspective sometimes with, all the shenanigans that go along. So we'll carry his memory on. But if you're willing to hang around here for a few more minutes, I'll hit stop on this. We'll do a There I Was story, and then I'll let you go about your day. I appreciate you joining me on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.